This week, we get to see the debut of the #1 KTM. Your defending World Supercross champion Eli Tomac is making his KTM debut in Canada. We are off to Vancouver to a full-size stadium that's held many Supercross races before. Last weekend, we did learn a lot, so we're going to get into all of that and everything else you need to know before the gate drops. Alright, so the first thing I want to get into is just exactly how disappointing it was last weekend that the broadcast was pretty much unavailable on the World Supercross website. I've directed everybody on how to be able to purchase that, and unfortunately, it just did not work out. They did offer a refund for that this weekend, considering that Justin Cooper is second in the points right now, and he's probably going to be the closest one to Ken Roczen after this weekend. Why doesn't he just race the whole series? I don't even think he's legally allowed to, since he's really not assigned to any particular team. So he can only do limited races. He's not even allowed to do the full series without being attached to a real team. Up in the SX2 class, that's the 250 class, we have Max Anstey. So he is at the top. He has 45 points. That's the maximum amount of points you can score at an event right now. Really nothing bad you could say. He got all the whole shots, led all the laps, won all the races, looked really good, and really the only two people who are even close enough to challenge him in the points right now is going to be Shane McElrath and Cody Schock, both pretty capable riders, and I'm sure that they will battle him at some point. But it does seem like it's going to take a bad start in one of these third motos or main events where they can really make up some points for them to try to close back in on him, because right now in second, Shane McElrath, your defending champion, is already down. He's at 37 points, so he's already 8 points back. A pretty big chunk considering that this is only after one round. That being said, there is 45 points on the line. 2 points behind Cody Schock is where we find Cole Thompson, and he did pretty well. I think he got third in this championship last year, so nothing new for him. I would expect him to be right inside this top 5 all season long. Then we have Cody's teammate, Enzo Lopes. A lot of cheers for Enzo Lopes last weekend. We weren't in his home country, but we were as close as we're going to get this year, and that was really cool to see. He did have some pretty cool flashes where I believe he even moved all the way up to second at one point, and then he kind of bobbled in the whoops. So he was looking really good. If he didn't do that, I think he would have been a lot closer to the podium. Unfortunately, there is already a pretty big gap between him and Cole Thompson. He's 8 points back. So a ways to go, but still right here in the top 5. Sixth in the championship, 2 points behind Enzo, is where we pick up Kyle Peters. He was solid, but really no flashes, no running up front. It wasn't like he had a really good moto or anything, just solid. Seventh, only 1 point behind Kyle Peters, is where we find Colin Park. And a lot of people were really excited to see him in that interview wearing the No Fear gear. They've been back in the game for a bit, but it was great to see them on TV, and a lot of people, were screenshotting it and being like, oh wow, no Hicks. I was hoping for a little bit better performance out of him. Wasn't really sure what to expect, especially racing the electric Stark. There were some sightings, but really nothing to write home about. Then in 10th, another 2 points back, is where we find one of the better stories of the class. Anthony Bourdon had a catastrophic injury at the beginning of the year and missed all of Supercross. So while this definitely wasn't up to par of what we would expect for him, you have to remember that we have another rider with 45 points, and that is Ken Roczen. His night was pretty similar to Max Anstey's. He got out there, pretty much led all the laps, and won all the races. As you're going to see when we move through this list, he already has an absolute stranglehold on this championship. It's going to take a huge mistake out of him for him to lose it at this point. Now, I'm sure he will have battles at times, and they'll likely be with the wildcard riders, so it's not like this is going to be necessarily boring, but unless something happens to Ken, which we all don't want to see, I think this championship's already over. 8 points behind Ken is where we pick up Justin Cooper, but like we talked about in the intro, Justin Cooper is not even allowed to attend all the races since he's not even assigned to a team, so realistically his points don't matter. This is the last race that he's slated to do this weekend, and then that's it for him in World Supercross for the year. Now, he'll likely be second in the championship going into round 3, but that's really not going to matter. So he did look pretty solid. Go after him in that third main event. And speaking of Hayden Deegan, third is where we pick him up. He finished third overall after some up and down finishes and poor lane choice in all 3 main events. He's not going to be in this points championship either because he is not even racing this weekend. So not much to say about him. He looked good in his 450 debut, and he'll be back in 2 weeks when the season goes to Australia. So we have to jump all the way back to fourth, 14 points behind Ken Roxon to pick up the next closest rider in the championship, which is actually Christian Craig. So shout out to Christian. Had another rider making his team debut, which was Jason Anderson. Now he did get tangled up in one of the rounds. I think it was the first race he went down. So that definitely affected his night. Overall, I think he did ride a little bit better than Christian, but really there didn't even seem to be that much of a speed differential between the two. But 8th in the championship is where we find Ryan Brees, and he looked good at times. He's done really well in arena cross, so look for him to be right there. We're going to a bigger track this weekend, so I'll be curious to see how he does there. Then tied with him, we have Matt Moss, and he actually ran up front briefly a couple of times. He looked really good, made a couple of spicy passes. I think one was on Christian Craig. That was pretty interesting to see. Obviously, he's right in the thick of that top 10 battle, but really, this is a disappointing result for him. He was well inside the top 10 in the 450 Supercross Championship here in America, so you know that he's capable of better results than this. But he was pretty inconsistent, especially as the series dwindled down. So maybe he's trending down right now. I'll be curious to see if he can turn this around at all during the season. 1 point behind Justin is where we pick up Austin Politelli. He's right here in 12th, looks good. Then in 13th, we have Henry Miller. He's only 1 point behind Politelli, and this is kind of right where I expected him as well. He was a top 10 guy in 250 Supercross and rode solid, but really never had any flashes, so this kind of all makes sense. Then in 14th, we have Jorge Zaragoza, and he's 3 points behind Henry Miller. Now, he had his moments. Things got a little interesting. He made it hard on Hayden Deegan multiple times. That was fun to watch, but obviously he did end up fading, and overall didn't look that good. He was on the start. And then in 15th, we have Jordy Tixier. To be honest with you guys, I did not notice Jordy at all night, so I'm not sure exactly what was going on with that, but obviously he was out there. And then with the DNF, we have Vince Friese. We already kind of talked about him in the injury updates, so we'll have to see if he even lines up. I do believe he was out there for all the main events. I'm not sure why he scored the 0 because he should have got points at least for the third race. So I don't know if he did not get any points because he didn't finish. Not sure exactly what happened there. Anyways, hopefully Vince can bounce back this weekend. Hopefully he's all right. Now let's briefly jump over to the team point standings. I'm not going to cover all of the teams. I'm just going to cover a few of them. So at the top, we have the Quad Lock Honda team. They're looking really good right now. Like I said earlier, we do have a little bit of concerns with Anthony Bourdon. Anyways, qualifying, or I guess practice, kicks off at 3:40. Superpole is at 4:40. And there does seem to be a little bit of a lack of consistency here because the actual show starts at 6 o'clock. And last weekend, the gate dropped 8 minutes after that. But this weekend, they're bumping that all the way back 38 minutes into the show. So the actual gate drop isn't until 6:38. Now, as far as the timing in between the races, it does fluctuate a bit, but it's basically 15 to 20 minutes in between each gate drop, with a relatively big gap in between the third SX2 main event and the third SX1 main event, because they actually do the podium and all that for the SX2 class before they do the final SX1 main event. So the gap between those two gate drops is actually about 30 minutes. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the weather. It's actually looking pretty rough this weekend. The high for the entire week is like 50 degrees, and it's supposed to rain from like Wednesday all the way through the race. But the good news is we're in a stadium and it does have a retractable roof. So hopefully, I'm sure they have that thing covered up and it's not going to matter. But I just know that somebody might mention, hey, it's raining over there, and it should not matter. So that's the good news. We're in a massive stadium, a true Supercross stadium this weekend, so it'll be interesting to see just how much that thing fills up. That being said, Paris Supercross is also this weekend, so we have double Supercross races going down, And if you guys enjoyed this show, I also did a race day updates covering the Paris Supercross as well. So it's going to be right here in the end screen. If you guys enjoyed this show, make sure you check out that show as well. Lots of racing this weekend. So looking forward to that. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.